Hello and welcome to Office Hours. We'll give folks an opportunity to join us, and we'll start in about a minute or so. If you could do me a favour, if you could let me know that you can hear me, perhaps type into the comments box. Let me know whereabouts in the world you are. Oh, look at that! Found the emoji button as well. Wonderful. I'm going to take that as a positive sign that folks can hear me. Hello, Ludovic. Hi, Will, in Cincinnati. Lovely. That's good. It's good that I'm loud and clear. Okay. So what we'll do is I'll do a quick introduction, and then we'll get started. I'm sure that more folks will join us. Hello, Katura. Lovely to see you. I just need to let you know that we're recording this session. This will run similar to previous ones. I will do a bit of an introduction, just to warm you up. Really, I've done these things before, and of course, sometimes it just takes a little while for everybody to feel as if they can contribute. And so I will, whilst I'm doing the introduction, I'll pause for a moment or two, and I will pose some questions, and then we'll collect those questions to make this more of a two-way thing for the vast majority of this session. As you can see, we've got the comment section that I will ask you to populate for both comments and questions, and then I hope that I'll be able to invite you up for a conversation to actually speak with you, because I think context is very important when we're talking about learning and development, rather than one-size-fits-all solutions. By way of introduction, I'm David James. I'm CLO of 360 Learning and Loop, and formerly Director of Learning Talent and OD at Disney. Now, whether it's called Learning in the Flow of Work, Workflow Learning, Point of Work, or Performance Support, it's been a hot topic for the last few years, but there seems to have been as much confusion about what it's called as much as how to do it, which may have muddied the waters somewhat and challenged its legitimacy. But I personally think it's a potent option for L&D, potentially the most potent option that we have for making demonstrable impact. So I'll start, as I said, by telling you a little bit about my experience and my thoughts on this particular topic. I will pause and pose questions, and hopefully we'll engage in good, rich conversation as we go on. So learning the flow of work is as old as work itself. It's just not as scalable as other ways of doing L&D. When I was first studying training and development in the late 1990s, I learnt about a type of training solution, which was the earliest form of company training, called sitting with Nelly. Now I'm going to test to see whether I'm the oldest in the room. Has anybody ever heard the phrase sitting with Nelly before? Come on, someone come and bail me out. Thanks, Jess. Right, for those of you who don't know, it may be an Englishism, I'm not sure, but it describes a new starter sitting with an experienced worker, shadowing them to see how the expert does it, and then taking over tasks and responsibilities with the guidance and support of the experienced worker on hand. Now, this is learning in the flow of work. Firstly, in the flow of an experienced member doing it, and then whilst the new starter does it next, until they achieve confidence and competence and can go it alone, albeit with help readily at hand. Now, this works well with fairly predictable and repeatable work, but its limitations are with scale and complexity. For example, it doesn't work as well with knowledge work because of the evolving nature of it. And very rarely does one person know how to do one person a font of all knowledge on one particular role. It usually takes a lot of people in a department or even in an organization to truly understand what's required within a role. Although handovers are still commonplace, as one person replaces another experienced hand at any given company. So if learning in flow of work is as old as work itself, then why is it such a hot topic now? As I mentioned before, it's at scale that sitting with Nelly has its limitations. And there's a tipping point in any organization's maturity that means they stop relying on internal experts to help with onboarding or employee development and important transitions. And they begin looking outwards for learning solutions alongside its administration and coordination. I know of a UK company that was growing at such a pace that they sent all of their managers and leaders on a Harvard training program in the US. But most companies will send employees on training courses a little closer to home to help them to grow. Then they bring these sets of solutions in-house and add generic online subscriptions or online learning into the mix. And whilst ticking the training box, they're not sure if it's having the desired effect, if any effect at all. So the function grows into an educational facility that looks good, especially when grown from nothing, and seems like it could be attractive to employees and candidates. Courses get good ratings and the numbers in the LMS are modest, but show positive signs of engagement. But the L&D offering is still, by some way, unsatisfactory. And we hear phrases like, we need to be more aligned to the business, or we want a seat at the table. So let's summarize this. L&D provide largely generic solutions that are expensive and time consuming, and they're unable to demonstrate any link between spend and results beyond people saying they quite like going on the course. The reason that L&D needs to get close to the business is that it's nowhere near the business doing things the way that I've just described. Now let's return to learning in the flow of work. It's all about the work. It's all about guiding and supporting people to perform and get results as they transition and as they're expected to adapt. This approach is absolutely and completely different from how I describe most L&D functions growing and operating. Now, I'll pause for a moment. How is what I'm describing reflecting in your organization? Do you agree or not with my summary so far? And what we'll do is we'll just dip in, and I'd love to, at this point, get your thoughts, your challenges, your questions. Allows me to pause myself. I've just seen your comment, Jason. Thank you very much. As if I didn't feel old already. The thing is, Christina, there's a cultural element to this as well. That the learning and development generally looks like this. So I wouldn't say that I wouldn't be too hard on yourself, but there is real reason to do things differently. I was doing a session with Charles Jennings and a couple of others this morning. We were talking about how it needs to change, but what I've just described is the norm. I haven't worked in company learning and development since 2014, but I've mentored others and I've consulted, and this is largely still the case. So Will says, largely come from operations, so I tend to get more benefit of the doubt. It's very hard to prove concept new training before we implement it. Yeah, absolutely. And again, referring back to the session I run this morning, I think that there's learning and development aligned to operations seems to have more legitimacy. But thanks very much. I'll come back to the to your question shortly, but I'll just continue with the topic and start talking about how you do L&D in the flow of work. Now, I've chosen L&D in the flow of work as opposed to learning in the flow of work or workflow learning. Mainly, I think that Josh Burstyn he tried to trademark learning in the flow of work as a phrase. Workflow learning belongs to Bob Mosier and Conrad Gottfredson. Gary Wise is an advocate of point of work, and I like to describe L&D in the flow of work describes where I believe we as a function can apply our focus, our analysis, and our solutions. But there are different levels and entry points into L&D at the point of work. It seems as if sometimes it could be unattainable, but no, it's very much attainable. But before I go in and I describe how to do it, I'll first of all tell you what it's not. It's not e-learning. It's not courses on desktops. It's not micro-learning. It's not and cannot possibly be off-the-shelf content, because how to do things in somebody's job is inextricably linked to how things are uniquely done in your organization. So let's start with performance support. The first stage in learning in the flow of work is largely performance support. If there are things that employees are more likely or more likely distinct cohorts of employees rather than looking at simply individuals, are not able to do or are doing wrong, then performance support can be used to help correct them. Insert this into where and when they do the thing that they are in the flow of work doing, and then you are in the flow of work. So if employees are entering data wrongly or incompletely, then adding some guidance in the instructions in the form of text or a pop-up can help them to do that thing correctly. More reactive performance support is easy to deploy, and as long as it's solving a real problem, then results can be easy to achieve and demonstrate. For example, this is a problem for these people. This is when and where it occurs. So that's when and where we will help them. The way that to think about it, and I think that it's easy to get lost in a digital solution and think that digital has its limitations. But if Nelly, going back to sitting with Nelly, is sitting next to you while you're doing this, she could point this out and move you in the right direction. And that's the way to think about it. Someone's sitting next to you, or in a case of knowledge work, you've got several people sitting next to you, sitting around you, who are experts in distinct fields for which you need support or guidance. You might ask them, or they might offer to support you in an area that you can't easily achieve the expected performance or results effectively or efficiently. That's a frame in which to place it on. It's not about learning, and this is where the L&D part over learning in the flow of work occurs, because it's guidance and support to help you to do more of the right stuff as unfamiliar situations and challenges arise, rather than a just-in-case element of learning for something that may happen at some undetermined time in the future. It's inextricably linked from context. A more proactive performance support can be uncovered by working with a cohort of employees who are expected to perform a certain way and get certain results, but aren't able to. By understanding their experience and their blockers, the blockers that they are experiencing, a minimum number of resources can be created to see if they help matters. Again, as before, it's all about the employee's ability to perform in the way required and achieve desired outcomes. In terms of L&D in the flow of work, how close can we get to the moment of need in order to influence the moment of apply? Those great words by Bob Mosier and Conrad Goffredson when they're talking about the 5 moments of need. The sweet spot of learning and development, they say, is being there at the moment of need to influence the moment of apply, the point in which they do the job. The employee determines the moment they need help, so we need to find out what they need and when they need it. Then we might be able to provide, say, a cheat sheet, a screen recording with a voiceover, maybe a process flow, a text description, or whatever is most easily gets an employee from not knowing to doing in the most friction-free way possible. Let's consider skill building. Learning in the flow of work has uncapped potential, but the potential is rarely realized because of misheld beliefs in L&D. For example, L&D might believe that skills can't be developed with digital solutions and can only be done so in the classroom. This, of course, isn't true. Skills are honed when and where people work, which is a place classroom training can't reach. So if people are going to learn by doing, then how can we be there to influence the way they do it for the first time? An example of this is with first line manager training. We might think that our 2-day flagship program is where new managers learn their craft, but it's not. They learn how to manage while they are managing. So how can we help them there? Firstly, we must understand what they're trying to do and what they're not able to do efficiently or effectively. Without this, then we might as well buy micro-learning. We don't need to know it all, but we know a little bit. We need to know a little bit, and then we can help. We can build trust and start moving the needle iteratively. So what are your thoughts on this so far? Agree, disagree? I see some comments coming up. Janice, I feel like everything you're saying points to more one-on-one learning and doesn't necessarily mean that a trainer is doing the training and facilitating learning. How do we apply this feasibly with limited resources? How do you influence leadership to buy in? Oh, Janice, I'd love to have that conversation with you. What we will do is, let me just see how much more chat, see if this would, see if this is Right. What we'll do, Janice, if you wouldn't mind just holding on for a moment, I would love to have you up for a conversation very shortly and talk through that. Jess says, I think the point about not knowing it all is critical. We need to get comfortable with test and learn. Absolutely, Jess. Yeah, taking much more of a product management mindset in which we just we recognize the actual problem that people are experiencing, and then we put a minimum valuable product out to see whether we can move the needle just a bit, and then do more of what works. I'm on the road, be home in 10. Brilliant, Janice. We'll book you in for 10 minutes if you wouldn't mind letting us know when you're back. Will says, this makes sense to me. We have started to use more manuals, workflow software, interactive lists to help give them tools as they start to learn. Yeah, absolutely. Propping up the and supporting the actual performance. And Annette says, we need to not go into solution mode and get to the root cause of the problem. Annette, that is absolutely it. One of the real bugbears of learning and development, and I must say that I've been in the profession since the late 1990s, and I have seen fads come and go. Fads which are usually silver bullets, and those silver bullets aren't just technology; they are they're even approaches to say management and leadership. If I start with the technology, I say in most things I talk about, I ask people, do you remember interactive video? And people go, oh yeah, I remember interactive video. I haven't heard about that for a while. Again, because it was going to save learning and development about 10 years ago. But of course, it's probably working quite well somewhere, but not to the extent that learning and development was buying it 10 years ago. I've seen it. AR and VR will be exactly the same. We've seen very similar with gamification and learning games. It just seems that we seem to want to be chasing engagement, because if we could just engage our audience, our employees with our new and novel delivery modes, then they'll see the value in it, and then we will magically affect performance. The only fad that I've not seen stick in learning and development is the only thing we need, and that is a true understanding of the problems that people that are being faced, how to recognize critical points of failure in an organization, and then work with the people responsible for doing the work and getting the results, and then experimenting to see whether we can effectively move the needle. It's because learning and development seem intent on delivering learning rather than affecting the way that the work is done. But using the approaches that we've been describing on here as well, we're using analysis and what did you mention before when I said about product management? Oh yes, Jess, you said about comfortable with test and learn. A product management approach, which is taking responsibility for fully understanding what it is that isn't working effectively now, working with the people responsible for that work, and then just running experiments to see whether we can move the needle. This is faster, cheaper, it's less risky, and far more effective than aggregating common needs and then delivering standardized solutions across an entire organization, hoping that this time more than any other time that we've been doing this over the last 2 decades, that this is actually going to make a demonstrable difference. And yet we go scrapping around after we've finished the scheduling and the delivering, and trying to figure out if there is any return on investment whatsoever. Right, so we'll come back to that in a moment. I'll just finish off. Thank you very much for getting involved. This is brilliant. I will come back and I'll invite you in for conversations in a moment. But first of all, I want to talk about how we do this. How do we do L&D at the point of work? And this will build on the comment that Janice made, and we'll be able to broaden this and contextualize it. So if we know what we're trying to affect, then we can run small live experiments, as I've mentioned before. Ask experienced managers what they've done in the shoes of the new managers as they attempted to overcome unfamiliar situations and challenges for the very first time. What worked and what didn't work for them. Record these in easily digestible formats. So text requires the lowest production value. So you can just say, this is what I did in that situation. You can share screen recordings with a voiceover, which is great for showing people what you do, perhaps with using systems or highlighting process flows or the dynamics of working between teams. If you've got, say, an organization chart. Other diagrams, process flows can work. Sharing video explanations from experienced employees can be incredibly powerful, but the cost of production goes up. You're just running an experiment to begin with at first to move the needle in the right direction. You can do more of what works and increase production value later down the line when something is actually working and there's a chance to increase positive results. So my top tips for L&D at the point of work. I've got 5 top tips. Number 1, address real problems. I'll say it again. The learning and development vendor who figures out how to point L&D into the direction of solving real problems is the one going to be the unicorn. This is going to blow everything else out the water, because otherwise we're looking for silver bullets to address undefined problems. But we need to address the biggest problems we possibly can. People have to care if we are to move them in any meaningful way. And it's easier to pick something they already care about than to try to make them care about something that we in learning and development want to. If it's a real problem, then there'll be data to show the impact. If you can take that data to those responsible for achieving the results and find out from them what they need in order to move the needle in the right direction, then you're on the right path to business alignment and demonstrable impact. Step 2, ask SMEs and subject matter experts to help solve the problems by creating digital resources and facilitating conversations and workshops alongside them. So true collaborative events and content. Number 3, run small experiments with as little investment of time, money, and effort as you possibly can in order to make a positive impact. The closer you get to the point of work, the less context you need, and the more laser focused you can be on guidance and support. Number 4, measure impact only in terms of the KPIs of the workers you're seeking to influence. And number 5, iterate. Do more of what works and less of what doesn't. Right. Now let's have some conversations. So Jason, you mentioned, it sounds to me like you're saying it's not just delivering content, but determining that the content solves a problem or assesses a problem and the change outcome. Yes, absolutely, Jason. That's exactly what it is. Far too much learning and development is so as I see it, is that in the absence of a full curriculum, L&D build a curriculum. In the absence of an exhaustive online learning offering, they plug in an exhaustive online learning offering. Neither of them are solving any problems except filling a gap. Now, people attend those programs. Sometimes they know why they're there. Sometimes they don't know why they're there. They usually experience something that has close to no context with the actual work that they're expected to do, and then they're expected to translate to add the context and then transfer that back to the workplace. Yeah, exactly right, Jess. It's just a great big shopping list. Elliot Maisie said it brilliantly. Said that L&D's confused their role with being in publishing. So what we do is we just deliver stuff and we provide learning, but we can't measure the impact of any of that, and that's because we've got solutions looking for problems, but without defining what those problems are. Now, this isn't hypothetical what I'm talking about here, but so learning and development teams who are adopted, say, a product mindset and more L&D in the flow of work. And I speak to these people on the podcast, on the learning and development podcast all the time. They move at pace. They speak with their stakeholders about what's actually going on in their teams and what the expected level of performance is. They get the data to show that there is a real problem, because again, there's a real blocker. You speak into a stakeholder and who says, "I'd like some time management training," and a lot of learning and development teams will say, "Brilliant. What would you like in it?" Or what is it you're looking to achieve from it? And then they'll write the list of what goes into the training course. but they don't understand the context in which people are expected to perform. If you were looking at this from a performance perspective, or seeking data, you would be asking, so tell me more about what's going on here. What are you seeing is happening? What isn't happening, and what would you like to happen? Who specifically are we talking about here? So instead of taking the order, as it were, there's an exploration of what it is that that is actually not working the way that it should. And I was getting seeing data as well. You're not just talking about something observable, but if you're talking then about the impact of that as well. So if that is occurring, so what is or isn't happening as a result of that? And then you can get down to the nuts and bolts. You're sitting next to a stakeholder and saying, we can see what the problem is here. And then what you can do is you can either design a minimum number of resources that you can get to people at scale, or you can invite them to conversations, or you can do both. You can invite them to conversations to discuss exactly what is going on and what they can do in order to move the needle in terms of the performance and the results. We'll ask. We're working on a major articulate course that will act as a simulator for more difficult tasks. The idea is to let them learn, fail before they get to the front line, and it matters for the company. Okay, look, I'm a big fan of simulations. Will, I think that simulations certainly help to help people prepare for the front line. Milica. I've definitely got your name wrong here. What do you see from your experience of the biggest challenges learners face in the work context that L&D call to support? Can we already see the trends among key challenges that influence one's performance today? I'd love to get you up for a conversation, if that's all right, at the very least, so that I can learn how to say your name. I wonder if you wouldn't mind joining me. I'd love to get your context to understand the client group that you support. Perhaps a little bit more context about what type of learners. Personally, I've done analysis for learning in the flow of work for new starters, for new managers, for established leaders. In all of these different sets of cohorts, and I'd certainly be able to share some of the key trends. And I wonder if you would be willing to. They say we use the phrase "jump on stage," which I think makes it sound scarier than it is. Oh, wonderful! Thank you. So we just need to unmute you and share. Here we go.
Hello. Yeah, I was
First
wondering
of
if
all,
I should just jump in immediately.
how do I say your name?
So it's Milica.
Milica.
Yes, yes.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you for your question. Could you tell us a little bit about where you work and a little bit of the context behind your question?
Yeah, so I am leading a L&D team in a tech company in Berlin, and we cover very different verticals from onboarding to offboarding. And you can imagine my team is supporting very different moments in employee, let's say, life cycle. So programs are very diverse. And I know that this is very general question, but what I'm trying to coach also my team is to really get to the point. If we kind of create learner personas, so we try to go back and think of creating what the challenges are. For me, it's like thinking a little bit proactively. Can we already see what are the biggest challenges when it comes to really learning specifically? What are the key obstacles when it comes to having no distractions, or do people know how to reach to others, seek for mentors? So what are the obstacles to learners when it comes to work context, no matter where they are on the employee journey? Probably they will be diverse when it comes to people starting their role versus people who are more senior. But yeah, I wanted to ask if there is like a interesting tool or methodology that we as L&D can use to investigate or already see and kind of project what might be the key challenges for certain employee segments. That was more something a little bit generic, I know, but maybe this helps you
Yeah,
understand.
it does absolutely. And what it leads me to first of all is when we think about what people care about. I think the biggest opportunity that we have in learning and development to influence people is when they need our help. Now they need our help when they're making transitions or they're expected to adapt. Everything else is hard work. We make it harder work for ourselves. So when you look at transitions, you've got people coming into your organization, you've got people who are moving between teams, and you've got people who are progressing. Those are the biggest opportunities we face. So in order to capitalize on those, say for example, new starters is easy, but I'd say that helping people when they're transitioning and expected to adapt is easy. Everything else is hard. So I'd say that with say new starters, we want to learn two things. What is it that they're trying to do, and what's getting in the way, right? Those are the two questions that you want to be asking them. So if you've got recent new starters in, say split out, so you want some that have been there say 6 weeks, some have been there 6 months, and some of them been there a year. You want them new enough that they know the pain, they can still access the pain of starting, and then asking them, when you first joined the organization, what is it that you were trying to do? Now we did this with an online tech retailer, and overwhelmingly they said, we want to know how to get the right stuff done. So this online retailer called their induction "How to Get the Right Stuff Done," because it spoke to what it is that people were trying to do. And then it was a case of what is it that you wish you'd known that would have helped you along the way. So they said, right, because this is a fashion house. They said, well, first of all, we wish we'd known what to wear on the first day. And you're thinking, my God, it's the most obvious thing. And they're telling us, like, what? So what do you do? This organization, you only got stuff done if you had a profile. So everyone was saying, how do you raise your profile around here? And you're thinking, of course, we're telling you the strategy, the structure, how to process your travel expenses, and there are some fundamental elements that people are just trying to do. Now, when I talk about this with, I spoke with Miles Runham, who is a digital consultant in the L&D space. He said he does a similar approach, and so we're talking about this. He said, I have never not been surprised by what people have said. I'll give you another example. There was another time worked in a very established organization, and they wanted to provide feedback skills for first line managers. So we got some first line managers in the room. We said, so what is it that you're trying to do? And they said, well, they explored why they wanted to give feedback. I said, well, what's getting in the way? And someone said, well, I've got a largely remote team, and I need to give feedback to these people. The L&D team were there, were going, oh, no, this isn't where we wanted it to go. And I was like, no, this is what they're telling us. This is what they said they need. And again, you have to say to L&D, this isn't about you knowing the answers. It's about us getting under the skin of it. And again, one last example, when we were doing this for first line managers, helping recognizing that, like a lot of organizations, the organization we were working with weren't supporting their first line managers as they were being promoted. So as they were making the career change, they had to wait like several weeks, months, and maybe the worst case scenario, years, to attend their flagship management program. But in the meantime, the first line managers were fumbling along, hoping that they would get some guidance along the way and they wouldn't make a catastrophic error. So when we asked them, what is it you wish you'd known? Somebody said, I just wish I'd known what it meant to be a manager here. And you go, oh my goodness. So it's a fundamental. They said, I want to know what questions I might be asked, what might surprise me, what tricky questions might I be asked? Somebody said, how do you manage someone who doesn't like you? And you're thinking, it's all gold, but the only way you find out, because what you've got to realize is that you're not just technically developing managers, you've got a group of people who are a cohort, new managers, who have gained this new responsibility and are butting up against the culture of your organization. So it's not about how to be a manager, it's how to be a manager there in your organization. So you need to unpack that, because it's all going to be really unique to your culture. And this is where it challenges what I think has been too readily accepted in our profession, that if management development works, in inverted commas, in one organization, then just lift and shift it and do it elsewhere. It doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because it doesn't accept culture as an important factor. I believe, and I've said it on this before, that trying to remove culture from employee development is like trying to remove an egg from a cake. Unfortunately, it's baked in. You can't. There's no more egg. It's all cake. So what is it that we can do to provide the uh, the map of the actual terrain so that people can navigate it, and not just a map of this land that we think that managers operate in a vacuum. It's all very different. So what my recommendation to you, Melissa, would be, do one of these employee, so the way you do it, it's very easy. You get these people together with a load of post-it notes. First of all, you say, what is it when you became this, or when you were promoted, or as you came into the organization, and really you're going to get to the nub of, as you made this transition, or as you were expected to adapt. Beyond that, there's no rationale, there's no motivation for them. So as they're making this transition, what is it that they were trying to do? Your line managers might say to you, I was trying to prove I was the right hire. I was trying not to mess things up. I was trying to develop credibility within my team. So you've got a list of these on one side, on say on a flip chart. Then what you do is on post-it notes, you get them to individually say, so what was getting in the way? What were the unfamiliar situations, challenges, and questions that you faced that meant that you weren't able to do this easily? And so you get them to write it down. If you want to get into the flow of work, then you'd say to them, whereabouts on your journey, ideally, would you have had this information? So some of this stuff, it would have been really helpful to have right at the outset, before you entered into the that role. But for some others, it might be, say, during the first week, or in the second week, or in the third week, or however. And then you want to really boil it down to, what, if you could only do 12 of these, what's going to have the biggest impact? So you really want to be working on a minimum valuable product, and then just do more of what works afterwards. But I would certainly say, map out the employee experience and look to enhance that from there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love it. And I think one other component that I would maybe add is the expectations when you come to culture, right? There's certain also expectations that are set by, their line managers, or generally leadership principles or whatnot, that can be combined and see how that fits. So yeah, very practical. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks very much for coming up. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Right, so Janice is home. I wonder, Mary, if we can invite Janice on, because I think her question was really important. Going back and just to remind, she asked, I feel like everything you're saying points to more one-on-one learning, and doesn't necessarily mean that a trainer is doing the training and facilitating learning. How do you apply this feasibly with limited resources? How do you influence leadership to buy in? I would love to have that conversation with you, Janice, if you are and here you are.
Hi, David. Sorry, I literally just got home.
That's all right. No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Everything that you say, like, I was bringing my child to the pediatrician. Everything that you say, I have to get on these calls, because I think you are just an absolute guru. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. So you mentioned there, and sometimes I feel that that there is this disconnect when we're talking about learning and development in terms of recognizing learning needs. What sometimes when people hear me for the first time, they think, all right, so we're not coming from the top and then coming down. We have to get the learning needs from the bottom. So we have to do people individually. And really, I'm talking about operating from data and working swiftly with cohorts in order to fix real business problems, which, it
could
just
flow
isn't.
either way, truly.
Yeah, that's right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So explain to me. So you asked a question there about it seeming more one-to-one. In my conversation with Melissa just a moment ago, does that dispel some of that, or
it does? I think, and we've actually talked before, but my organization had zero learning and development, like nothing, as of about 3 years ago. And we went very off the shelf at that point. We have some compliance training that we have to do. So they pulled those and started an LMS, and those are hosted in there. And then from there, that same sort of packaging idea is what they've gone with for the last 3.5 years. So I've been trying to shift that mentality. Now we have over 600 classes in our LMS, and I think we've like overdone it. And I think we've stopped focusing on the learner, and we've just focused on creating content. So right now, the challenge that I'm sort of facing is I'm trying to sort of step back. And when you were talking about with Melissa, and I think I might screw up her name as well, sort of about the post-it notes, I thought that might actually help sort of introduce that idea a little bit easier, and not only using that with new hires, but even the people that are really currently in the organization that still really need that training and that learning, because they never have experienced it the right way, even across 3.5 years. So I'm just, of course, our leadership loves to say, we have over 600 courses in our LMS, and they're using that as like a sales tactic. And I'm like, we can't focus on just that. We're almost like lying. We do have that, but what value is it adding? So I'm desperately trying to shift leadership mentality away from that, because in this instance, more definitely hasn't meant that it's better.
And what you've just described there is when learning and development is seen, or it's positioned more as a perk, or as you know, or the number of classes seems to lend itself to reinforce the EVP, the employee value proposition, rather than equipping people to actually do the job. So the good news is if you've got 600 classes, then it kind of looks after itself. As long as you're not being dragged into the administration or delivery of those, then you can apply your attention. Where I say that this actually works, L&D in the flow of work actually works, is when you've got a problem that has to be solved. Now, so when you're talking with stakeholders, or you know, or with your boss, if you're looking, it was so funny. I was talking to a connection of mine about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she's interviewing for new roles, and she said every single role I go with, they're trying to fix induction and new manager training. Has nobody got this right? I said, seriously, with the amount of attention and with management development, the amount of money that's applied to it, why is everybody still trying to fix it? And the reason is because they think it's something that can be delivered, and it's not. It's because no one's doing the analysis. So the thing is, if either of those are broken, and I always pick those because they are they're low-hanging fruit, they're easy to fix, and once you've actually fixed them, they take minimal time to iterate, but we can't carry on just doing the same as we have. So if you do the white wall exercise with the post-it notes, then what you're able to do is you're able to do your live experiments, because the very next people who get promoted, if you've got those unfamiliar situations, questions, and challenges in the order in which people think that they needed them. So I needed this before I started. I needed this on day one. I needed this by the end of week one, and all of that stuff. Then you can test that in the wild. You could get that out to people. You don't need anything flash. I mean, you can get the smart tech that automates
They
it
sort of
along
built
the
your
way.
roadway for you in a sense by giving you that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's all about helping people to do the thing that they are now accountable to do. So it's not theoretical. There are no models in there that I was on a session this morning. Someone mentioned Maslow, and we said, of course, like 70 years old. I remember apologizing that was 50 years old in 2000. But it's nearly 70 years old. So we're not sharing theory that may or may not apply to it. We are saying, if we know that this was a problem for your peers and your colleagues as they were joining 3 weeks ago, as they said, so this is going to help you to plug that gap, and then you iterate from there. And I always say that if you could just have 12 resources rather than 600 courses, then you know what works or not. Because if you've done 12, 6 of those are off the scale with engagement, and people are saying this is really useful, but no one's using the other 6. It's either the wrong stuff at the wrong time, it could be the right stuff at the wrong time, but you're able to just move it and play with it, and then you can just engage in a conversation with those new starters. Because if you're focusing on what you could do at the point of work, then you can actually engage with them in a conversation about what is actually helping them, what's helped them to move the needle to more
Sure.
seamlessly assimilate into your organization, having a conversation about the work and their assimilation rather than their learning. So you're able to continue to iterate it in the same essence that you built the first 12 resources, which was with the people that are expected to perform. And the beauty of this as well, and this is again why I think that the L&D at the point of work, in the flow of work, is so powerful, that as opposed to training where you can passively experience the training, you can walk away, not apply any of it and think, well, the training didn't work. That like L&D in the flow of work is only about helping you to do more of the stuff that works. And to experiment, but it puts all of the onus on the individual. No one's going to be saying, well, these resources don't work. It was I gave that a go, or that wasn't as useful as it could have been, and you could get some of the real-time feedback. But it's all about it all comes down to L&D in the flow of work really helps when there is a pressing need because someone's transitioning or they're expected to adapt. And they recognise that there is genuine concern for themselves. The hardest thing in the world is to generate concern and get people to care about something that we don't care about. I spent most of my L&D career trying to do that.
Yeah,
and it really is. It's the hardest possible way to do it.
I 100% agree. I had actually that exact conversation with my boss yesterday. They want us to implement a mentorship program, an onboarding program, and a manager and training program, while I'm also trying to put together a large conference for our company. And I said, I don't have enough buy-in. I can't influence people. I can a little bit, but this has to reach more than just the people that I normally talk to. Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of it, is struggling to get engagement, feeling like somehow that's maybe my responsibility or something that I can control, and sometimes it's really not.
And you know, the beauty of this, Janice, is that you don't need any buy-in for it, because what you can say is because this all you need to do is get the people in the room. Hopefully your HR information people can get you a list of people who have started in the organization in the last 6 months.
Sure.
And you can pull together enough of those people who care about making the onboarding experience better. Then what you do is you add resources in the flow of work and conversations. I mentioned conversations earlier on top of what's already been done, because what you really want is you want your stakeholders to be saying, Janice, it seems that the new stuff that you've added is far more effective than the old stuff. Why do we carry on doing the old stuff? And for you to go, great point. Because they need, because it's so low risk. Because once you've understood what the problem is, it becomes so much more apparent what you need to do. And as I mentioned earlier, it's faster, it's less risky, it's cheaper and more effective than trying to load a lot of information into people's heads, letting them off into the wild, and then letting them translate that into back to their work. So he doesn't ever need any buy-in. You could just add it to begin with. But I'd always say that to do what Goffris and Moshe say is start with the performance support or the workflow learning to try to plug immediate needs and the things that are barriers to people actually performing, and then work backwards. So you might need a training course, so you might need some e-learning, but you'll try to plug the performance gap first of all. So you will be able to flip it around, but it's nothing that anybody I know that's implemented this have never had to ask for permission, but they've gained a great deal of credibility because they're able to show that they've made a difference, rather than when you start with the topic and the course, you're not able to prove the return on investment because you didn't know what the problem was in the first place, or the problem seems to be the absence of a program or some content. And of course, simply applying that looks like it's the answer to the problem until somebody asks the question, where's the return on investment? And you say, I'll go and see if I can find an algorithm somewhere. Go to a community. Does anybody know how to retrospectively find out what the return on investment is on the thing that I didn't know what the problem was? And I'm sure there are plenty of people making that money too.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of your audience today would agree that afterthought is very challenging, and it's an impossible answer to get later. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Janice. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thank you.
So we do have other questions. Fanny, you were asking a question, which I think we may have been talking about, but if you're happy to jump on, I'd love to have a conversation with you. You asked, you can use the same strategy to define managerial practices. Ask the employee, what do you expect from your manager? Do you mean that's kind of managing up, or what might that be? Fanny, I'm not sure we've spoken before, so so this would be.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello, Fanny.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet
I
you.
was just reacting to what you were saying, and I was thinking that you were explaining at this time that we should ask the our stakeholder to. Sorry, I have something on my screen. I can't see you.
If it helps, we can see you fine.
All right, well, that's fine. You were explaining that we should ask our stakeholder what they should have known, what would have made their life better when they arrive. And I was thinking that sometimes we are asking manager about their practices, and we forget to ask their employee. I mean, we should sometimes have the same the same method, like asking the employee, what are you expecting from your manager, so we can have information about the practices that the way that a manager should act. So that was correct, in fact.
Yeah, you're right. There's an interesting article. It was published in Harvard, I think, in 2016. I've shared it. I've mentioned it on one of these before, and and the article is called "How to Think Like a Data Scientist." And so the premise in a nutshell is that if we think there's a problem, say for example, we think that first line managers aren't engaging their employees and they're not making the most of the resources that they have available to them, which is common. Like when you're promoted to manager, last Friday you were a core contributor. You were being expected and rewarded to deliver individually. Then you're given a team, and so many of the first line managers then think, well, I'll carry on doing the job because that's what I was getting credit for. And then even if I'm a bad manager or as I'm learning the job, I can still be recognized. So they're not getting the most from the team. They're still trying to do the job of a core contributor. So if the assumption is that that first line managers aren't ready, they're not engaging their team members, they're not their teams aren't as productive as they should be, and we've got the risk of both losing the new manager and employees. You'd be asking yourself the question, what would we see if any of those was true? Right, so this is thinking like a data scientist. So this is where you dream it up. You'd think, well, what percentage of newly promoted managers leave within the first 6 months to a year? What percentage of team members actually leave once a new manager is promoted? How effective is a team at delivering in the first 6 months after a new manager is promoted, and if there was some kind of level of engagement that was measured? So all of those things you would see, and then all you'd need to do is put the systems in place to collect those. Okay, so you might not have any today, but you could start collecting that over 6 to 12 months. And so part of that would be asking, like collecting information on just how engaged a team is once, just generally, but you could go to new managers. So whilst you've got this new manager, how engaged are you? And it could become part of the, and then you could get down to the KPIs of what the team is there to do. If you've got a customer service team, to what extent is customer satisfaction or service level agreements, if it's internally, actually being met for the first 6 months of a new starter, a new manager? And then what you can do is you can apply your development on helping the new manager to do exactly what they're expected to do as they assimilate within the role, rather than attend a generic 2-day training program that covers Tuckman, that covers the GROW model, and all this stuff that may or may not be helpful, and certainly wouldn't be helpful during that assimilation. But again, you're acting off of data for which the input of employees themselves and how they're responding to having a new manager is a key factor in that.
And I like what you were saying. We had this breakfast with other L&D 2 weeks ago, and we were looking for KPIs, and we were thinking, how do you define great KPIs? And I think this is a good way.
Yeah,
what you were
exactly.
just
You go
great.
to what would that manager be accountable for? So what would we see if they weren't performing? So it's not the plucking things out of the air. What does a good manager look like? It is what is that manager in that team accountable for? What would be working if it was going well, and what would be happening if it wasn't going well? You'd get your own data points. You could speak with managers, you could speak with their line managers and say, what are their KPIs? What would we be seeing, or what do you see when you've got an unskilled or yet to be proven manager there? Get their KPIs. It's far easier to get the buy-in of both those new managers and their line managers if your key metric was what they were in the organization to do, rather than something that was a little bit more nebulous, shall we say, and harder to measure. Something that perhaps learning and development have been doing for far too long.
Thank you very
Wonderful.
much.
Thanks, Fanny. I really appreciate that. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for being involved. We've got a nice message there. Alison, this is perfect timing. Starting a new role in June, and guess what their 2 key priorities are? Ah, you've spoiled it. I don't have time to get. Of course, it's induction of new managers, but as I said, you can see how this works, because if you are responding to the contextual and organizational challenges that people are facing as they assimilate, then these aren't going to go out of fashion. You're not going to be looking at these in 2 years' time and thinking, oh, it's time for a refresh. You're going to be getting data on all along about what's hitting the mark, what's getting engagement, what's being assessed as useful, and what's perhaps fallen by the wayside. So you're always iterating, but you're never overhauling again, and you are able to equate your activity in addressing the major concerns of people as they assimilate into new roles. They're expected or they're expected to adapt, rather than necessarily just through the attendance and absorption of far too much information, either all in one go before they've faced the challenge, or way down the line as far as new managers are concerned. I need to write a book. I wouldn't be able to. There'll be no need to run these every month, Janice, if I wrote a book. Thanks, Jess. Look, we're coming up to the end of the session. Thank you everybody for being involved. It's everything because you're willing to jump on and have a chat with me, because I think as we learn this, context is everything. We cannot continue to buy off the shelf solutions and think that we're going to be making a difference and still be chasing our tail in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, if not longer. Wondering whether we've made a difference or not. We need to do the analysis, and then we can get close to the point of work to influence it. Now, we are running another one of these on the 19th of May, and it's a special one. We've moved it a little bit earlier, so I think it's in just over 3 weeks' time, because we have got some early insights from the L&D salary survey that we've completed in 360. So I'll be applying some commentary over the top of that. And I think that it will be a hugely interesting discussion about L&D careers, salary, L&D credibility, how we can increase all of that. And I think that there is a link between what we're talking about here and there, which is if we prove our value, then we're worth more. And hey, look, we feel better about ourselves as we do. So please join us. That's the 19th of May. Again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today and joining us and joining in the conversation, and hopefully I'll see you on the 19th. Thank you.